We kick-started the conversation yesterday on your fuel that you purchase when you go to the filling station and what impact it could be having on your vehicle without your being aware. Well, today we continue our conversation with a representative of the National Petroleum Authority in the person of Mr. Saeed Ubeida Lakutia. He is head of quality control with the National Petroleum Authority. Mr. Kutia, it's a pleasure to host you once more. Yesterday, you were here, gracious enough to be here in the studio with us. Today, you join us via Zoom. We're grateful for your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, so you're joining us via phone. So yesterday, we kickstarted the conversation. We spoke about the different dynamics. I want you to reiterate, okay, for those who may have missed the conversation yesterday. Why are some cars facing these problems? Spark plugs, sensors. And you know, yesterday after the conversation, I had a conversation with someone who made mention of the fact that, yes, indeed, she had also had to change her sensor on the back of, the same fuel bit. So just walk us through why this is happening, and then we can continue the conversation from there.
Thank you very much once again. Just to, as you said, to give some background. Following the globalization of environmental issues where there's a need to reduce emissions, particularly from fossil fuels. Vehicle manufacturers, largely for newer models, have adopted low-emission technologies. So most of these vehicles are called low-emission vehicles, LEV vehicles. It's mostly peculiar to more stable vehicles because the aim is to reduce consumption of fuel and also consequently reduce emissions from the attendant fuel used. So if you look at what is happening, it took us time because when a vehicle is jacking, these were the reports we were getting. So somewhere in October, we were getting complaints from customers or users of these fuels that they were having issues. And largely, the issues had to do with the car jacking. And the jacking is probably as a result of some issues. So first, the first thing that came to our mind was the fuel quality. So one important parameter or most important parameter for petrol is the research octane number. So we checked and all that is fine. Fast forward, we narrowed down and realized that the majority, over 90% of the vehicles involved were vehicles with low emission or vehicles that have the requirement for lower emissions. And that means that we have to look at the standard requirement of fuel for this particular vehicle. And that is how we narrowed it down to the fact that these vehicles do not require higher metal content generally. But in Ghana, the permissible metal is manganese. So we had to look at the manganese content in the fuel. And that is when we realized that the Ghana limit, yes, which allows up to 18 milligrams per liter, the same as part per million, of the manganese in the fuel, for a certain period, we had a number of consignments that were closer to the apex, from 15, 16, and even some rare cases, 17. So that is how we were able to narrow down to the probable cause of these jacking. And as a result of those content of the manganese or metals, then it leads to high deposit formation on the vehicle systems. Most importantly is the spark plugs and sometimes some of the sensors. So yes, that is the correlation or the background to this issue. So what we did immediately was to start recommending to the oil marketing companies to add deposit removers into the fuel. So when we did our statistics, we've seen that the issues have gone down depending on the level of effect. it will not just disappear. But we are monitoring these issues, and we realize that the numbers are coming down. And more importantly, from hence the time we detected, we have to talk to these importers that yes, the standard will allow up to this. And if you have read the communication issued by the NPA on this issue, we've also engaged the Ghana Standard Authority to review the standard of the manganese requirement from 18 to 6 for the normal regular petrol, which is normally red, or 9112, and also reduce it from 18 to 2 for premium gasoline, which is normally colored green for high-performance vehicles. So these have been the background to the issue so far and what we have done.
All right. So basically, just to focus a bit on that. So for the manganese content, so by and large, the metals in the fuel, okay, these are the ones creating the problems, from iron to lead to manganese. Why is manganese the chief culprit? You've mentioned that in, let's say, what we would call super, when you go to the different filling stations, you want to reduce that from 18 to 6%, and for premium, let's say RON 95 or RON 97, and all those others at a certain V power and the rest. If that is what you're referring to, clarify, you would want them to reduce the content from 18 to 2%. Please clarify. Is that the case?
Exactly the case. So for the premium, which is the V power and coal, it's supposed to be for latest vehicles. So mostly we are aligning not only the manganese, but all other parameters in the Ghana standard that are at variance with the international acceptable, particularly Europe. We are referencing it to Euro 5, which has a maximum of 2 allowable manganese content. So the more newer technologies that are used in these vehicles, the lower the tolerance to these metals. And again, you did ask, why manganese? We have prohibited other metals like lead. In fact, in the past, before that, I must say that there's a reason why these metals are there. The metals and other additives are used to ensure the petrol meets the research octane number requirement. In Europe and America currently, they are relying on alcohol, ethanol chiefly, to do that. So what we are doing is that once you close one avenue for boosting the research octane number, you have to open another avenue. So we have opened an avenue to add an additive called ethers.
Called what?
Ethers.
Ether. Is it E-T-H-E-R?
Yeah, E-T-H-E-R.
Okay.
Which we have now allowed to be added up to 15% volume. So when you add an ether has over 100%, 100 value research octane number, which will then boost the octane requirement. So you cannot, that is what has been the difficulty. You cannot close one door to research octane number without opening another channel. And you must explore your situation to see within your jurisdiction and your permutations, which parameter can you permit to be able to achieve. Don't forget that the research octane number is the most important of all the quality parameters. So if we had problem with the research octane number, almost all the vehicles will be affected. So you have the older vehicles that tolerated this metal. So that's why when we did the disaggregation of the data, we realized that it is the newer vehicles with these requirements that are having the issue, and that is why we narrowed it down to the metals. And in our case, because we have closed the door to lead and iron, which are more dangerous, manganese becomes the culprit.
You made mention of the fact that you've compelled some of these, the supplier companies, okay?
Yeah.
The oil marketing companies to use deposit removers. Are we talking about the big 3 or 4, or are we talking about generally? In other words, are we focusing on the Shell, the Total, the Goil, among others, or are we talking en masse, including some of the new ones like Zen and others? Are we talking about all of them or just a select few?
So what we've done is that in this situation, one of the things that makes sometimes the issue delay, you don't have to talk in vacuum. You must do a testing to see the actual data before you can recommend at what levels and concentrations you permit or you will recommend. That it has to be based on factual data that we analyze. So sometimes this analysis takes time, and in some cases we have to fly some samples abroad because of limited testing capacity in the country. So to put it in a summary, we are doing on specific cases. That is when we know that exactly these consignments of fuels have these levels of these manganese, we do that. But the good thing is that we have most of these big oil companies, I don't want to mention names, already using these additives to promote, because generally, whether the metals are high or low, there is deposit formation over a period. So what is just happening is that the higher level are allowing or fast-tracking and shortening the lifespan of these blocks and systems. But naturally, with time, there will still be deposit formation. So already, these big oil companies are already adding these additives. So, but what we've done is that where we have the new case to believe that the levels are elevated, then we have to recommend a higher dosage or quantity to be added.
Now, many Ghanaians don't, well, there are quite a number of Ghanaians whose vehicles are not brand new, in the sense of having bought it from a showroom, directly from there, getting a manual and all of that. Some may be able to find some manuals online, but that's the best they will get. A few of the Ghanaian population will go and buy it, purchase it new, get the manuals and everything. That leads me to the question, okay? In terms of all of these people whose vehicles are of a 2016 to a 2023 make, how do they check to know the levels of emission that are required for their vehicle so that they know which types of fuel to go for? Plus, there's also the question. There was even a point when I was purchasing V-Power, but look at the prices of fuel now. It's been a long time since I did that. Look at the prices of fuel. So even where you know that that is what you should use for your vehicle, it may be well nigh impossible to buy it looking at the prices. What is your reading on all of that? How do you even know that your vehicle, or is it just that once it's after a certain year, the emissions must be much lower for the vehicle?
Well, it's a very complicated question, I must admit, but we try to do that on behalf of users. So we have to, the Ghana Standard Authority particularly, which is responsible for the setting of these standards, of which we are part of the committee that do these standards, have to look at the data of vehicles in the country to be able to make some of these determinations. But for very high-performing vehicles, some of the indication is written even on the fuel tank lid where you open. So if it is a high-performing vehicle mostly, you see written there probably around 95. And that is where you don't have a choice of buying the regular. You must buy the high-performing fuel. And that is why we provided these two grades in Ghana. So, but the good thing is that the NPA have planned that going into next year, we will label this, we will mandate these oil companies to label the octane rating on the pump, so that the general one is the RON 91, which almost all the normal vehicles will use. But the enhanced or the premium grade, the RON 95, just like you mentioned, one of the brands, it will be labeled there, such that if your vehicle requires that level of performance, then you don't have a choice. Because in that case, when you buy a lower one, you will have issues.
What then? Two questions in one. It's very related. So for such vehicles, and I want to believe that on the back of fuel prices now, some people may know that their vehicles must thrive on whether it's RON 95 or V-Power or the higher performing premium fuels, but they will not use it because of cost. What then will be the implications for such people? What will be the long-term effects, even as we've seen in recent weeks and over a month now, of such people who have been using these fuels with the complications they are seeing? What could be the effects on their vehicles?
I really will have a difficulty there because these vehicles themselves are very expensive. I wonder why somebody can afford a Bugatti and not be able to purchase a high-performing vehicle, fuel.
But you know, a Bugatti is on the high end. Someone may buy, you know, let's say a BMW or something else. It's also expensive, but if you look at the cost component of filling it up to the brim with, you know, these high-performing fuels, you may realize that the person would want to think twice because they guzzle fuel.
Okay, let me tell you a typical situation that happened some months back. A consumer called to the NPA and indicated that he has bought a fuel and he said poor fuel and it is affecting his vehicle. So we investigated and we checked the fuel quality, everything was fine. But we took the vehicle number, which we call the chassis number,
right,
to enter into our system to determine the octane requirement of the vehicle. And we realized that this is a vehicle that requires octane 95. So virtually he has gone to buy the normal fuel, which doesn't have a problem. And because the vehicle requires a higher octane number, the vehicle was jerking. So octane will also cause jerking and even break down your engine. So we have to educate him that, look, your vehicle. He said, yeah, he was told to be buying a certain brand. It's just that day that he was not in the position to buy. And I said, look, if you joke that the cost of repairing your engine compared to your fuel, you have to necessarily buy the required fuel. So it's just to tell you that once you have those kind of fuel, you don't have a choice of buying a lower grade.
Wow. So you're saying here and now that if you're driving any of these new vehicles, and especially if you check and it says octane 95, which is like RON 95 or V-Power or something of the sort, you don't have a choice. You can't go for super at some point, because if you do, you are basically killing your vehicle. You are messing up your engine and the cost of that. Wow.
Exactly so. So if you look at the case of the Europe and the Americas, that is where we are trying to get to. So you see that the RON number is indicated on the pump because it serves yourself actually. So you determine which one your vehicle requires and you fill the appropriate one. If you do not do that for the high-performing vehicle, you will have or you may have a greater problem than the fuel cost.
And so when you've already been using, for example, fuel that is not what you should have been using, that was part of my question. Then what happens when you stop and you start using the right one? Over time, will it remedy whatever problems you were facing, or would you have to then maybe spend some money? Because I've seen people who have had different issues. For someone, the engine actually died. So what then can such people do to revert to what should have been the case? Or is it that you can just move on and start using the right thing?
Yeah, I will recommend you move on because the good thing is that, in fact, some new vehicles are employing a technology which we call velocity variation.
Okay.
To be able to, it's a smart kind of vehicle that says that, look, I'm supposed to use RON 95, but I am using run 91. So the control board and the engine will readjust itself such that the engine will not be performing at optimal, but it will prevent engine damage. So in that case, the vehicle will not be pulling as it's supposed to pull or give you the power as it's supposed to give you, but it will prevent engine damage. That's it's new technology out there that some people are employing. But on the average, it's just like if on a lighter note, if you invite somebody from my hometown for a dinner and you give him kinky, that will be problematic. You see, that is even in the side of human. So, but because these are machines, you necessarily have to provide them. A lot of times, people have damaged their engines without knowing by using even the wrong lubricant, engine oil. It can damage your vehicle.
Right.
The viscosity requirements are specific to the type of engines that we run.
I mean, so, I recall how for me, I had to check for my vehicle which of these engine products to use because there are specifications. Like I said, well, some people have manuals, so it's easy. For others, you have to do some more research. But many ordinary people will not even bother. They will just put anything in there, and that can create complications. Now, beyond the fuel, and that is where you really come in, but you've mentioned oils and other things. What are some of the other things that people should be looking at to prevent, breakdown of their cars? I know now I'm stretching you a bit, but from where you sit, as much as you can answer the question, what more should ordinary road users be looking at to ensure the lifespan of their cars also, are out there, they stand the test of time?
Okay, there's one important thing, but most of the time it escapes or many people are not aware. When you start your vehicle in the morning, there's, if you watch your vehicle dashboard, there are 2 meters. One is the speedometer, and the other is the tachometer. So the tachometer will tell you the revolution of the engine per minute. When you start your vehicle in the morning, you see that meter will go up. Then as the engine sounds for a while, it will be coming down. I'm sure you've observed that.
Right.
It must come to an optimal figure, which indicates that the oil, when you park your vehicle overnight, all the oil will go down into the sump. When you park the vehicle, the engine must run idle for a while for this oil to lubricate all the parts before you start moving. But many a times, some people just start the car and they start moving, and that can damage the engine because you are running on a dry engine without lubrication. So it's one thing we have to always take care of, that when you start the vehicle, you have to allow time. So you see, normally the tachometer will rest on either a 1 or a 10, depending on your rating, or something slightly. If it goes below, the engine will go off. But it's an indication that the engine is well lubricated and it's ready to move. Aside that, because of fuel cost, we also have to look at our tire pressure. Most of the time, the tire pressure is written on when you open your vehicle, the door, and you check the side of the door, the required tire pressure is always written there, but we also don't take care of it. If you don't have the optimal tire pressure, it increases your fuel consumption as well.
Oh, wow. So not having the right tire pressure can also increase your fuel consumption?
Yes, exactly.
How does that work?
So when the tire is below the pressure requirement, there's greater friction between the tire and the ground. So a tire is just like somebody has deflated all your 4 tires. Let me search on a extreme case. And you want to push this car. You realize that it's difficult to push. Even when you are driving it and one tire is completely flat, it's very difficult to move. That is the friction. It increases the friction between the tire and the ground, and that resists the movement of the car. So if you watch Formula 1 and others, they check the tire pressure regularly, because your tire pressure, once you have the optimal, it reduces the friction, and that allows the car to move freely and reduce fuel consumption consequently.
Well, we're in the Yuletide. That season is already upon us. People are going to be traveling a lot. People are going to be using lots of vehicles, not just private vehicles, buses, among others. Are there any final tips you'd like to leave us with before you leave? And again, fuel consumption. If there's anything you'd like to share with us before you leave, we'd be grateful.
Yeah, there's one issue I observe normally with commercial trucks or vehicles. When they fill fuel, they overfill it, and some will be shaking the car. So that, I don't know whether you have observed that before.
So yeah, they fill more than the requirement.
Exactly. Because the tank is designed, when you are filling your car, it will come to a point where the dispenser will cut automatically.
Right.
Yeah, that is the optimal, because there's supposed to be an airspace between the fuel and the top of the tank.
For burning to happen.
For burning to happen. But most of the times we shake the car and overfill it. It can damage your fuel pump, and it can also, in fact, sometimes it gives the erroneous impression that when you do that, the car doesn't consume. It's just because you have filled the car beyond the gauge rating. So you can move for like 80 kilometers before you get to the gauge reading, where you now see your gauge coming down. It doesn't mean the car is not consuming. You have just overfilled the tank. It can even lead to safety implications. So it's one of the things. Fortunately, in Ghana, we have one of the most numerous filling station arrangements you can find anywhere in the world. Hardly will you say you can move from the next town to the next town without seeing a filling station. So I will recommend that we don't have to overfill these cars in this situation. In fact, sometimes in extreme cases, if you have a crash, that can even lead to explosion. Right.
So it's dangerous in itself.
Yeah.
I did say that was the final bit, but this just came through. Let me just run it by you. So you do know that some of the bulk oil distributors have warned that bringing a pegging when it comes to the level of petroleum specifications will come at a cost. In other words, consumers will have to pay for that. When they transfer it, consumers will have to pay for that. That's what the BDCs are saying, or the bulk oil distributors are saying. How do you react to that? Because already people are struggling with fuel prices. What do you think that will mean?
Unfortunately, I'm not vexed in pricing matters. So I will struggle to make any. It has been one of the discussions. I'm being mindful as a committee member to the standard, but it has been one of the talk on the table for a long time. And that is why sometimes we are even having some of these problems. You see, there are times that we have to bite the bullet and move forward because the world is moving and we cannot stay behind. That is one of the kind of dragons that have led to this current situation from happening. Because it's not rocket science that we know higher manganese content have implications on newer technologies. But it's about whether, as a country, the stakeholders think it was time to take that one off. And it's always a difficult balance. But sometimes the consequences outweigh the prices you would have paid for.
Okay. We're very grateful that you took the time to join this conversation, Mr. Kutia. And we'll stay in touch as and when those issues crop up. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
I'm grateful. Right. Thank you.
And that is Said Ubaidallah Kutia. He is head quality control with the National Petroleum Authority. But stay with us. There's still that all-important conversation we have coming your way this morning as we look at the Ability Fair. That conversation will be up next. We'll create ample time for you to share your thoughts with us as well. So stay with us. We'll be back on the AM show.